The house was always quiet in the early morning, not silent, but calm in a way that felt heavy and still. Sunlight came through tall windows and rested on polished floors. Somewhere inside the house, a piano waited. It stood in the main room, large and black, like it belonged to another world. Most people saw it as a beautiful object. Only a few knew what it truly meant. The servant arrived before anyone else woke up. She had been doing this for years. Her steps were soft, almost trained not to make sound. She cleaned the rooms, arranged the furniture, and made sure everything was perfect before guests arrived. No one asked her opinions. No one asked about her life. To most people, she was simply part of the house, like the walls or the doors. While she worked, music often filled the air. The famous pianist practiced every day, sometimes for hours. The sound of the piano traveled through the halls and followed her wherever she went. She never stopped working when the music played. She wiped tables, folded cloths, and carried trays while listening quietly. Her face stayed calm, but inside her chest, something always stirred. She never stood too close to the piano when others were around. It was not her place. She knew that well. Still, when the room was empty, she sometimes paused near the doorway, just for a second or two, long enough to hear the rhythm, the rise and fall of the notes, long enough to remember her life had not always been like this. There was a time when mornings were filled with practice instead of cleaning, a time when her hands touched piano keys instead of rough cloths and cold handles. But life had moved in another direction, one she did not choose. Responsibilities came early, loss came quickly. Dreams slowly learned how to stay quiet. Now, she lived in the background. She served tea during lessons and gatherings. Guests spoke loudly about music, talent, and success as if she were not there. Sometimes they praised the pianist, calling him gifted and rare. She lowered her eyes and continued pouring tea, though her ears caught every word. The pianist enjoyed attention. He was not cruel, but he was comfortable being admired. Music had brought him respect and status. People listened when he spoke. Students watched his hands closely, hoping to learn his secrets. The piano was his world, and the house reflected that. Everything revolved around sound and performance. The servant watched all of this from a distance. She never interrupted, never corrected. Even when she noticed small mistakes during practice, she said nothing. It was not pride that kept her silent. It was habit. Silence had become safe on certain evenings, when the house emptied and the lights dimmed. She stayed behind to clean the main room. The piano would stand alone, its surface reflecting the soft glow of lamps. During those moments, her hands sometimes trembled, not from fear, but from memory. She did not touch the instrument. She only looked at it, then turned away. People would never guess her past by looking at her now. Her clothes were simple. Her hair was always tied back. Her voice was low and careful. There was nothing about her that suggested music lived inside her. That was the way she wanted it. Attention had once brought pain. Being unseen felt easier. As days passed, the house prepared for a small gathering. Friends of the pianist were invited. Some were students, others were admirers. The servant worked harder than usual, making sure everything was clean and ready. She knew these events well. They were filled with laughter, applause, and loud conversations about art. On the day of the gathering, she moved quickly from room to room. The smell of tea and fresh cloth filled the air. The piano had been polished until it shone. Chairs were arranged neatly. Everything looked perfect. When the guests arrived, the house changed. Voices echoed. Shoes clicked against the floor. Compliments were exchanged. The servant stood quietly to one side, waiting to be called. She kept her eyes lowered, but she listened. Soon, the pianist sat at the piano. The room slowly grew quiet. Fingers touched keys, and music flowed easily, confidently. The guests watched with admiration. Some closed their eyes. Others smiled. It was a familiar scene. The servant stood near the wall, holding a tray. Her body stayed still, but her heart moved with the music. Every note felt close, almost personal. She knew this piece. She had known it for years, long before she ever stepped into this house. When the performance ended, the room filled with applause and laughter. Compliments followed quickly. The pianist smiled and stood, enjoying the moment. He spoke casually, relaxed and confident, making small jokes to keep the mood light. It was then that his eyes moved around the room and landed on the servant. She did not notice at first. She was adjusting the tray in her hands. The guests were still smiling, still talking, with a playful tone. The pianist made a comment that was meant to entertain the room. He pointed toward her and jokingly suggested that she should play something next. Laughter followed immediately. It sounded harmless, light. No one expected the moment to mean anything more. The servant froze. For a second, the room felt far away. The laughter faded into a distant sound. Her hands tightened around the tray. She kept her head down, unsure how to respond. This had never happened before. No one had ever invited her into that space, even as a joke. The guests waited for her to laugh it off or walk away. That was what usually happened. That was what was expected. But inside her, something old and quiet began to wake up. She remained still, standing between who she was and who she had been. The piano waited. The room waited. And without realizing it, everyone was about to step into a moment that would change how they saw her forever. The laughter that followed the pianist's joke hung in the air, light and careless. The guests thought it was amusing. They expected the servant to smile politely or shake her head and move away. No one thought for a second that she might take the comment seriously. She stood still, gripping the tray, feeling the warmth of the tea seep into her hands. Her mind raced, and a quiet determination stirred inside her. She looked at the piano. It seemed larger than before, more commanding, more alive. The polished black surface reflected the bright chandeliers above, and the keys, white and black in perfect order, called to her silently. Memories rushed back, memories she had not thought about in years. Her fingers remembered the touch of the keys, the smooth gliding from one note to another, the thrill of creating music that could speak when words failed. The guests continued to laugh and chatter. The pianist smiled, thinking the moment was a brief, funny distraction. He made a casual remark, teasing her lightly again. "Go on, show us what you can do," he said, still smiling. The room leaned into the joke, everyone assuming she would respond with modesty or a simple refusal. But she did not step back. Her heartbeat was strong and steady now, and she found herself walking toward the piano, every step measured, calm, yet full of anticipation. Guests turned their heads, surprise spreading across their faces. Some whispered to each other, unsure what was happening. Some were amused, expecting a comedic performance. The pianist leaned back slightly, curiosity replacing the humor in his expression. She sat down on the piano bench. Her hands hovered over the keys, not touching them at first. The room became unusually quiet, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The guests, sensing something different, stopped talking. Even the pianist, who had never been caught off guard, felt a strange tension. There was something in her posture, something in the way she looked at the piano, that commanded attention without a word. Then, very gently, her fingers touched the first keys. A soft note emerged, tentative, almost shy, but it was precise, clear, confident in its own way. She paused, listening to the resonance. The sound was simple, yet it carried a depth that seemed to draw the room closer. The pianist's eyebrows lifted slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. This was not a joke or a casual attempt. This was music. She began to play slowly, letting her hands find the familiar patterns. The notes moved gracefully, filling the room with a gentle, flowing melody. It was a piece that many would have recognized, though she played it in her own style, blending technical skill with emotion. Each note was purposeful, every pause deliberate. The atmosphere shifted. Laughter disappeared. Conversation stopped. Guests leaned forward, astonished at the skill and feeling she poured into the music. The pianist watched, amazed. He had never seen anyone approach the piano with such quiet authority, especially someone he had never known to play. His fingers twitched as if he wanted to join in, but he stayed seated, realizing that this was her moment, not his. The servant's performance was commanding, yet humble, unassuming yet powerful. Her eyes occasionally flicked to the audience, just a glimpse, acknowledging their presence. But her focus remained on the music. She had not played in years for anyone but herself, yet the memory returned effortlessly. Every note, every chord, flowed naturally. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, almost unconsciously, her heart and mind fully absorbed. Guests were spellbound, unable to look away or speak. It was as if the music had woven an invisible thread around each person, holding them captive. The pianist realized something else. This was not just skill. This was expression. It carried the weight of years, of hidden passion and long-forgotten dreams. There was sadness in some notes, joy in others, and a quiet strength running through it all. For a brief moment, the room stopped being a gathering. It became a sanctuary. Music became the language that connected everyone, regardless of status or role. She continued, now playing faster, more confidently. The tempo increased, and with it, the room seemed to come alive. Guests felt their emotions being stirred. Some smiled softly. Some closed their eyes to absorb the music. Others held their breath. The pianist, himself a master of his craft, felt a mix of awe and humility. He had performed this piece countless times, yet the servant's interpretation brought it to life in ways he had never imagined minutes past. Though it felt longer, she did not play for applause or recognition. She played because the music had been waiting inside her for years, waiting for a chance to speak. Every chord, every melody, was a story she had carried silently, and now it poured out effortlessly. As she reached the final notes, the room held still. The last sound lingered, echoing softly against the walls. Silence followed, complete and profound. No one moved. The pianist's mouth opened slightly, unsure what to say. Guests exchanged stunned glances, unable to break the spell. Finally, a single clap broke the silence, then another, then a cascade of applause and astonished murmurs. The sound felt almost overwhelming, yet she remained calm, her hands resting lightly on the keys, her eyes downcast. The pianist approached her slowly, his face a mix of admiration and disbelief. "I had no idea," he said quietly, his voice filled with genuine respect. The servant smiled faintly, her lips barely moving. It was not a boastful smile, just a quiet acknowledgement. She had done what she needed to do, not to impress, but to reconnect with herself and her music. Guests crowded around her, asking questions, offering compliments, some even with tears in their eyes. They were curious about how she had learned, why she had stopped, and why no one had ever known. She answered softly, honestly, revealing just enough to satisfy curiosity, while keeping some parts of her life private. The story of her talent became intertwined with the story of her perseverance, her silent struggle, and her love for music that had never died. The pianist stepped back, giving her space, realizing that this moment had changed the dynamic of the house. He had been admired before, respected for his skill, but now there was a new presence in the room, someone whose story and talent demanded recognition. The servant, once unnoticed, had emerged from the background and claimed her place, not with arrogance, but with grace and authenticity. By the end of the evening, the atmosphere in the house had shifted. People spoke differently, looked at her differently. They were no longer just a servant. They saw her as a musician, as a person with depth and history, someone who had quietly endured and now shone. The room was filled with a new energy, a mixture of respect, admiration, and curiosity. The pianist, who had jokingly invited her to play, now understood that this simple moment had revealed something extraordinary. Later, when the guests left and the house grew quiet again, she remained by the piano, touching the keys lightly, almost as if to say thank you to the instrument. She did not need anyone to watch. She did not need praise. The music was enough. It had always been enough. And for the first time in years, she felt the joy and freedom of playing once more, not as a servant, not as an observer, but as a musician, fully alive in her own right. The days after that evening were different in the house. The pianist continued his routines, practicing and performing, but something had shifted. He noticed the servant in ways he had not before. She moved quietly through the halls, but now his eyes followed her sometimes, curious. There was a calm confidence about her that had never been there, a subtle presence that could not be ignored. The servant herself felt a change. She still performed her duties, cleaned, served tea, and arranged rooms, but she moved differently, carrying herself with a quiet pride that came from having reclaimed a piece of herself. Her interactions with the pianist and guests were the same outwardly, polite and unobtrusive, yet inside, she felt awakened, alive in a way she had almost forgotten. The piano had reminded her of who she was beyond the chores, beyond the role others had assigned her. One afternoon, the pianist called her aside. He wanted to speak with her alone, away from the guests and the noise of the house. She felt a mixture of nerves and anticipation as she followed him to a smaller room, where the piano was placed. The atmosphere was different there, more personal, more intimate. He looked at her seriously, something he rarely did with anyone. "I need to understand something," he began. "That night, I had no idea you could play like that. Where did this come from?" She hesitated. For years, she had kept her past music life hidden, protecting herself from attention and expectations. Now, she found herself speaking carefully but openly. She told him of her early years, how she had studied piano passionately as a child, how circumstances had forced her to stop. She explained that music had always been her escape, her way of expressing feelings she could not share otherwise. The pianist listened quietly, nodding, absorbing each word, his expression softening with every detail. He asked questions, not out of judgment, but curiosity. How had she learned? Why had she stopped? What had kept her playing in secret all these years? Her answers were honest, revealing a life shaped by necessity, loss, and endurance. She spoke of long nights spent alone at the piano, practicing without recognition. She spoke of the moments when she thought she had given up forever, yet music always called her back. The pianist realized that talent like hers did not simply vanish. It had lived quietly, waiting for the right moment to emerge. He felt a mix of admiration and humility. He had spent years mastering his craft, yet here was someone who had done the same in silence, unseen, uncelebrated. Her story added depth to her performance, explaining the emotion that had captivated everyone in the room that evening. After their conversation, the pianist suggested something unexpected. He wanted her to play more regularly, not as a joke or a distraction, but as a genuine collaboration. He could teach her some techniques she might not have learned before, and in return, she could inspire him with her unique style. She considered it, realizing that this could be the start of a new chapter in her life, one that allowed her to embrace her talent without fear or hesitation. In the following days, she began to practice more openly. When the house was empty, she would sit at the piano for hours, experimenting with melodies, improvising, rediscovering her abilities. The pianist occasionally watched from a distance, offering tips and encouragement. Their relationship evolved into one of mutual respect, mentor and student in a delicate balance. Yet there was no hierarchy in terms of talent. She had skills he had never seen, a voice in the piano that was entirely her own. Guests started noticing subtle changes too. The servant no longer seemed invisible. She carried herself with quiet assurance, a presence that was impossible to overlook. When she moved past the piano, some paused to watch, curious about what she might play next. The house itself seemed to have a different energy, more alive, filled with a sense of potential and creativity that had not been there before. One day, a young student of the pianist came to visit. She was impressed by the servant's skill and asked to play together. The servant agreed without hesitation. They improvised a duet, their hands moving in perfect coordination, the music flowing effortlessly between them. It was clear that her years of silent practice had not dulled her abilities. Instead, it had refined them, giving her a depth of expression that few could achieve. The pianist observed quietly, sometimes joining in, sometimes letting them lead. The servant's confidence grew, and with it, her willingness to explore new pieces and styles. She began to compose small melodies, creating music that was uniquely hers. Each day at the piano became not just practice but discovery, a journey back to herself and forward into possibilities she had not imagined. The household adapted as well. Other servants and staff began to notice her talent, no longer seeing her solely as a worker, but as someone remarkable. The initial surprise turned into admiration. Even the guests, when they returned, were astonished to find that the quiet servant who had once been invisible could play with such skill and emotion. Conversations shifted, respect grew, and her story spread slowly but surely, always spoken with wonder and appreciation. Through all of this, she remained humble. Fame or recognition was never her goal. She played for herself, for the music, for the joy of rediscovering a part of her soul that had been hidden for too long. Yet, the impact of her talent could not be contained. Every note she played touched those who listened, revealing the beauty of resilience and the power of hidden potential. The pianist often reflected on that first evening, when he had jokingly asked her to play. What had begun as a moment of humor had transformed into a turning point. He had witnessed a remarkable story unfold, a life shaped by circumstance and yet unbroken. He realized that talent and passion could survive in silence, waiting for the right moment to shine, and that sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries came from the most unexpected places. As weeks turned into months, the servant continued to grow in confidence and skill. She still performed her daily duties, yet the piano was no longer a distant dream, but a constant companion. She played for the pianist, for the guests, for herself, and with each performance, she reclaimed a little more of the life she had thought lost. The house, once a place of routine and order, had become a sanctuary for music, for stories, for moments that reminded everyone that greatness often hides in the quietest corners of life. Her story began to inspire others quietly. Those who worked around her started to see that talent could exist unnoticed, and that opportunity could come at any moment. They watched her dedication, her humility, and the joy she found in her music. learning lessons about patience, resilience, and the courage to embrace hidden gifts. And the servant, once unseen and unheard, had begun to change not just her own life, but the lives of everyone around her, simply by being brave enough to answer a joke with music, and in doing so, showing the world who she truly was. The days that followed were filled with music and curiosity. The pianist had begun inviting her to join him during practice, and the house seemed to vibrate with a new energy. She had always known the piano was a part of her, but now it was alive in a way she had not felt for years. Every note she played felt like a conversation with herself, a release of emotions she had tucked away long ago. The guests began to notice subtle changes whenever they visited, a quiet but undeniable presence that drew attention without demanding it. One afternoon, the pianist suggested she play for a small gathering of respected musicians. At first, she hesitated. Performing in front of strangers again felt intimidating, even though she had proven herself within the walls of the house. But the pianist encouraged her gently, reminding her of the power she had shown when she first played. He spoke of how music was meant to be shared, and that her talent could inspire others in ways she might not yet imagine. The day of the gathering arrived. The house was meticulously prepared. Flowers were arranged carefully in vases. The piano shone like it had never before, and every detail reflected a celebration of music. Guests arrived, many curious to meet the servant who had stunned everyone with her talent. Some were skeptical, others intrigued. She moved among them quietly, her hands clasped in front, her heart steady, but her mind alive with anticipation. When it was her turn to play, she approached the piano with calm determination. The room fell silent, as though it too had been waiting for her music. Her fingers touched the keys, soft at first, exploring the melody carefully. Then, as her confidence grew, the notes became stronger, richer, flowing through the room and into the hearts of everyone present. She played with emotion and precision, blending technical skill with an authenticity that made every chord resonate deeply. The musicians in the room were astonished. Some closed their eyes, letting the music speak to them. Others whispered to each other in disbelief, questioning how someone who had been a servant could possess such extraordinary talent. The pianist watched from the side, pride and admiration mixing in his expression. He had known of her skill, but seeing it recognized by others, respected and celebrated, brought a sense of fulfillment he had not anticipated. Her performance was not just about skill, it was a story. Each note carried a piece of her past, the years of hidden practice, the moments of longing, and the quiet resilience that had kept her going. The music seemed to weave a tapestry of her life, and those listening felt they were part of something intimate and powerful. It was as if the piano spoke her history aloud, filling the space with emotions too deep for words. When she finished, the room remained still for a moment. Then applause erupted, loud and genuine, echoing through the house. Guests were moved, some with tears in their eyes. They approached her, offering praise, curiosity, and admiration. She accepted it quietly, her eyes downcast, a small, humble smile on her lips. She had not played for recognition, yet it was undeniable that her music had touched everyone present. The pianist approached her after the applause had settled. He spoke softly, congratulating her on her courage and talent. She nodded, still processing the experience. Performing for an audience, even a small one, had been intimidating, yet it also brought a profound sense of fulfillment. She realized that music had the power to connect people, to share emotions and stories, even without words. It was a gift she had carried silently for years, now given freely to others. After the gathering, the house settled into a new rhythm. Music became a central part of daily life. She and the pianist often played together, their collaboration bringing joy and inspiration. Sometimes they experimented with new pieces, other times they revisited old favorites. Each performance filled with emotion and understanding. The servant, once invisible, had become an integral part of the musical world within the house. Her presence respected and celebrated. Word of her talent began to spread beyond the house. Musicians and admirers from nearby towns came to hear her play. They were curious, amazed, and often humbled by the depth of her expression and the technical mastery of her performance. Invitations to perform in public followed, each one a new challenge, a new opportunity to share her gift. She approached these moments cautiously, but with each performance, her confidence grew, and her love for music deepened. Despite the growing attention, she remained humble and grounded. She continued to perform her daily duties, never letting success or recognition change her fundamentally. Her joy came from the music itself, the act of playing, and the connection it created with others. The piano had become a bridge between her past and her present, between her private life and the wider world. Each note she played was a testament to resilience, courage, and the enduring power of hidden talent. The pianist often reflected on the transformation he had witnessed. The servant, once unseen and underestimated, had emerged as a remarkable musician, inspiring everyone who heard her. He realized that sometimes, the most extraordinary gifts were hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to shine. The house, once a place of routine and order, had become a sanctuary for music, for discovery, and for the celebration of talent in all its forms. Through it all, she remained herself, modest, focused, and deeply connected to her music. She had reclaimed a part of her life that had been dormant for too long, and in doing so, she had changed the world around her. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was an extension of her soul, a vessel through which her emotions, stories, and dreams could be shared. Every time her fingers touched the keys, she felt alive, free, and entirely present in the moment. The experience had taught her that talent, passion, and dedication could never truly be hidden. Even in the quietest, most unnoticed corners of life, greatness could exist, waiting for the right opportunity to reveal itself. She had answered that call, not for recognition or applause, but for the simple, profound joy of playing the music that had always lived within her. And in doing so, she had inspired everyone who had the privilege of listening, showing that courage, resilience, and authenticity could transform not just a life, but the hearts of those around it. Time passed, and the servant's life transformed in ways she had never imagined. The piano, once an object she approached only in memory, had become central to her existence. She played daily, not just for herself, but for anyone who cared to listen. Her performances were no longer confined to the house. She was invited to small events, local gatherings, and eventually larger stages. Yet, she never lost the quiet humility that had defined her for so long. Each time she performed, people were astonished by the depth of her skill and the emotion she conveyed. Her music spoke of perseverance, of hidden struggle, of dreams that had been deferred but never forgotten. Listeners often found themselves moved to tears, captivated by the purity of her expression. She had a rare ability to make each person feel that the music was speaking directly to them, sharing a story they could understand and feel. The pianist, who had initially been amused by a simple joke, continued to guide her, though less formally than before. Their relationship had matured into one of partnership and mutual respect. He learned from her as much as she learned from him. Together, they explored new pieces, experimented with arrangements, and sometimes simply played for the joy of sound. It was no longer teacher and student. It was a collaboration born from trust and shared passion. One evening, a large gathering was organized to celebrate local talent. She was asked to perform first. The room was filled with musicians, admirers, and guests who had heard rumors of her talent. She walked to the piano with calm assurance. This time, there was no hesitation, no nervous glance. Her past had prepared her for this moment. She understood that the music she played was not just for recognition, but a reflection of her journey, a gift to be shared freely. As her fingers touched the keys, the room fell silent. The first notes were delicate, tentative, yet filled with intent. Gradually, the music grew richer, more powerful, weaving stories of sorrow, hope, and triumph. The audience was entranced. Every movement of her hands seemed to carry meaning beyond the notes themselves. They could feel her history, her struggles, and her joy, all embedded within the melody. There was a profound truth in her playing that could not be taught or imitated. The pianist watched from the side, a mixture of pride and awe in his expression. He knew the depth of her talent, yet he was still surprised by the emotional intensity she brought to every performance. He realized that her music had a rare quality, one that could touch souls and leave lasting impressions. It was a reminder that true artistry comes not only from skill, but from lived experience, and an honest connection to one's craft. After she finished, the applause was overwhelming. The audience rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, and some even wiping away tears. People approached her, eager to speak, to ask questions, to offer admiration. She accepted their compliments with quiet gratitude, her demeanor humble yet radiant. It was clear that her talent had moved beyond mere performance. It had become a source of inspiration. Despite growing recognition, she remained grounded. She continued to perform daily, often alone, finding solace and joy in the simple act of playing. The piano had become a companion, a voice for her unspoken thoughts and emotions. Her life, once dictated by circumstances and hidden in the shadows, now held a sense of purpose and fulfillment that had been missing for so long. She also became a mentor to others who showed promise. Young musicians sought her guidance, inspired by the story of a servant who had quietly nurtured her talent and emerged as a remarkable performer. She shared her experiences generously, emphasizing patience, dedication, and the importance of finding one's voice. Through teaching, she found another way to connect, to influence, and to continue the cycle of music that had saved her life. One day, reflecting on her journey, she understood how far she had come. From a quiet, unnoticed servant to a celebrated musician, she had navigated challenges, embraced opportunities, and reclaimed her identity. Her story was no longer confined to personal memory. It had become an example of resilience and the power of hidden talent. She realized that music had not only provided an escape, but had been a lifeline, connecting her to herself and to others in meaningful ways. The pianist, too, marveled at the transformation. What had begun as a playful moment, a joke, had revealed an extraordinary life and a rare gift. He often thought about the serendipity of that evening, how a simple question had changed everything. He felt honored to have witnessed her journey, to have played alongside her, and to have learned from someone whose talent was matched by grace and humility. In time, her performances drew attention beyond the local community. Invitations came from other towns, cities, and eventually renowned music societies. Each opportunity was approached with the same quiet dedication, a balance of humility and confidence. Her name became known, not for showiness or self-promotion, but for the authenticity and emotion she brought to every note. Listeners connected with her story through the music, feeling the struggles and triumphs she expressed so naturally. Throughout all of this, she remained herself. Fame had not changed her core. She still valued simplicity, sincerity, and the quiet moments spent at the piano. She understood that recognition was a byproduct, not the purpose. The joy, the connection, and the freedom of playing were what truly mattered. And in that understanding, she found peace, fulfillment, and a sense of harmony that had eluded her for so many years. Her life became an inspiration to many. The servant who had once been invisible showed the world that talent could exist in the most unexpected places, that courage and perseverance could transform lives, and that opportunities, when embraced, could reveal greatness long hidden. She had turned a simple, joking request into a life-altering moment, proving that even the quietest voices could leave an enduring impact. As she continued to play, teach, and inspire, she carried the lessons of her journey in every note. Her story became a testament to resilience, passion, and the enduring power of following one's true calling. The house, once just a place of routine and labor, had been transformed into a home of music, discovery, and inspiration. And she, once a servant, had emerged as a symbol of what could be achieved when hidden talent was given a chance to shine, forever changing the lives of those who listened and the world around her.